Next up, we have AJ Kushner presenting the Wrights at Manitoga, Reverse Queering American Modern Domesticity.
For the better part of the 20th century, Mary and Russell Wright were a pioneering industrial design couple whose innovative furniture, housewares, and lifestyle advice helped shape the aesthetic of and set the tone for 20th century American domestic life. Their multi-decade marriage and close creative partnership birthed numerous icons of American design history, from modernist furniture lines with Conant Ball, their colorful ceramic dinnerware sets, to their best-selling Guide to Easier Living, published in 1950. My interest in their legacy was piqued after a guided tour of Manitoga, their 75-acre house and studio in upstate New York, which includes a gallery featuring dozens of their domestic designs. But after visiting, I was surprised to learn from Jennifer Cabot that Mary was not the only love of Russell's life. In fact, she died long before the construction at Manitoga even began. In 2006, the New York Times printed that after Mary's premature death in 1952, Russell had a, quote, equally satisfying romantic relationship with Joe Chapman, a graphic designer living in the town adjacent to Manitoga. In an interview in 2022, Joe confirmed that they were out only to close friends, and the social and political environment of the 60s and 70s prevented them from living openly. The revelation that Russell Wright had a male lover for the last 12 years of his life inspired me to reevaluate both his and Mary's careers from a queer perspective. This led to a deeper look into Manitoga, the Hudson Valley dream retreat of Mary and Russell, but which the two men enlivened until Russell's death in 1976. The house, which Russell named Dragon Rock, is an experiment in integrating architecture within its natural environment and harmonizing industrial and organic materials and forms. It is a monument to the Wrights' ethos of fluid expression and transcendent connections. Russell and Mary first met in 1927 in their early 20s at the Maverick Art Colony outside of Woodstock, New York. Russell designed sets and costumes for the theater, and Mary apprenticed for an avant-garde sculptor. It was a utopian community in the woods, where artists like Isamu Noguchi and Alexander Archipenko flocked to be with like-minded hedonists and to resist the rapid industrialization of the 20th century. The photographs of campfires, guitars, body paint, masks, and cross-dressing could easily be mistaken as documents of the more infamous Woodstock of 1969. But as it was the 20s, there is something cabaret-like about these images of free spirits, thrusting unencumbered limbs into fresh space. At the end of the summer, Mary and Russell eloped. The culture of the Roaring Twenties set the tone at Woodstock. Many of Manhattan's neighborhoods had vibrant queer communities with lively nightlifes and prominent creative figures. While not risk-free, queerness and queer communities were visible and largely tolerated, particularly in the theater scenes that Russell and Mary were part of. This image is of a downtown drag show from the period. It was a form of entertainment that drew a remarkably diverse audience than one might think for the time. But the Great Depression of 1929 ushered in conservative social changes. Draconian regulations against immorality and economic devastation dampened the entertainment industry and queer social life. Russell and Mary pivoted from designing for stage productions to designing products for the home. Early work, such as the informal serving accessories line from 1930, are notable for being some of the first decorative and functional consumer products made from inexpensive aluminum. As with their line of circus animal figurines, we can see the melding of modernist industrial metals with theatrical, playful forms. And natural accents, such as wooden knobs or cork handles, lend a softening effect to help ease the user into handling an unfamiliar material. According to George Nelson of Herman Miller, Russell was the person most responsible for the shift in the taste towards modern in the 1930s. That's right, just Russell. Even though he and Mary were design collaborators, it was her idea to make Russell's the brand's name. More gregarious, she performed product demonstrations at luxury department stores, distributed marketing materials, published how-to articles in ladies' magazines, and did interviews on the radio, all in which she gave Mr. Wright credit for their concepts and designs. Arguably, by serving as spokeswoman for her husband, Mary reinforced their model of heterosexuality, heading off concerns about manliness despite his work in a realm of femininity. In 1939, they introduced American Modern, a dinnerware set in colorful glazes manufactured by the Steubenville Pottery Company. As with the earlier aluminum line, the pieces were intended for versatile use and casual occasions like buffet dinners and picnics, and one could purchase a single item rather than the entire set, which was the norm at the time. Functional innovations included rimless plates, which could be stacked to save space, serving pieces that could go safely into the oven, and molded dividers separating different foods on a single platter. American Modern and its competitor Fiesta, manufactured by Homer Laughlin, were two of the earliest non-white, solid-colored dinnerware collections available, though the former's colors were more nature-derived and its shapes more organic than the garish Fiesta ware. Its designer, a traditional ceramicist named Frederick Hurton Reed, added Art Deco-inspired concentric circles to the surface, in part to soften the severity of the color. In the Wrights designs, there are no sharp lines, only gentle curves, and some pieces are elongated or curved in such a way as to suggest movement. Whimsical and flamboyant, some figures have an obvious corporeality. One critic noted that the line had qualities of nudity and chi-chi color. Nevertheless, through the 1950s, the original production line sold over 200 pieces. All this fluidity and softness was part of their easier living philosophy, which they compiled in the book The Guide to Easier Living, a handbook for how to better manage all aspects of domestic life, like open-plan room design, informal buffet-style entertaining, one-pot meals, and systematized cleaning and maintenance. Tasks are delegated to each family member, including children, with an emphasis on an equitable distribution of labor. The many assignments conform to gender stereotyping, such as men and boys working in the yard and women and girls polishing silver. The entire family tackles the same room or category of chore together. When looking in the archives, I found a draft version of the book that is even more forceful about this. The American male must learn to share in the responsibility of maintaining the house and raising the children, must learn that it is not beneath his dignity to push a broom or a baby carriage, and American women must learn that the old concept of the home as a place where she rules and expresses herself to the exclusion of all others does not belong in this new world. Encourage your husband to enter any phase of home life that interests him. Isn't a good family life more important than keeping up with Mrs. Jones? Mary passed away in 1952, and Russell spent the next decade working on building their Manitoga retreat home, which they named Dragon Rock. It was to be their personal manifestation of their easier living philosophy, but experimental and more integrated with the natural environment. In 1964, Russell met Joe Chapman, a local graphic designer and single father. For the following decade, Joe assisted Russell in realizing his vision for Manitoga's landscape. Though they were not open as a couple at a time, I discovered that Joe was integral in designing and managing the landscape of Manitoga. He designed a dozen woodland paths that coursed along the land's existing topography. Like a meditation, each trail was named and drawn to highlight a particular time of day, season, or natural feature. Certain features are named after important individuals. Mary's Meadow is the large clearing that overlooks the pond and is an ideal picnic spot. But as with Mary, Russell has immortalized their relationship in the woodlands of Manitoga in a clearing called Joe's Room. Thinking about this outdoor room, the site of Russell's favorite garden, I think about how queerness reaches across space, conjures the ephemeral, unfolding the layers of time underneath. I think about how Mary and Russell's work and philosophy incurred deeper connections with nature and upended rigid structures of domestic life. I think about Joe, who is still alive, in his 90s, and still regularly walks the woodland paths. Thank you.